Let's start with our session. Today, we will continue with our section in quantitative research. Specifically, today we will discuss psychological measurement. And in other words, it is also known as psychometrics. So we will be discussing this very important topic today, and hopefully you will find it helpful even for the research that you will like to conduct for the IRP. Let's see about that. So can you confirm if you are looking at the full screen or not, right? You have a split screen? Okay, the full screen is now on.
Now we have the full screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start talking about measurement in psychology. As I already mentioned, psychological phenomena are not particles that can be decisively tested or discovered. So in order to measure these psychological constructs, we have to be really creative, but at the same time, we have to be systematic and really meticulous in the way we are assessing these psychological constructs. And today we will discuss about this whole process. We have to go from our research constructs that we have, and they have to be perfectly conceptualized. And then we have to translate this construct into a research variable. You know, the research variable is the phenomena in a way that we can directly measure it, and it can take different values, and this is why it is called variable. So it is the same concept that I told you in our previous session, going from conceptual variables to measure variables. It's the same thing, and we do that through operationalization. So we have to turn this abstract concept into specific indicators that we can actually measure, okay? So as you can see here in the screen, this topic has been widely discussed in the IRP. First, we had Dr. Like Asma telling us in the expert talk about the conflicts that we encounter when we try to go from philosophical concepts into psychological measurement. And more specifically, within the post-traumatic growth literature, we had already in our expert talk series, Laura Blackie, with the talk, The Importance of Methods for Exploring the Veracity of Post-Traumatic Growth. She was also telling us some of the issues, some of the caveats that we can have when we are trying to assess post-traumatic growth. Like, are we actually really grasping the phenomena that we are trying to measure? And the same thing was discussed by Eranda Yaya-Bikrim in the expert talk that he gave us in last year in the first meeting person. I already shared with you the link of this talk, and he was discussing very, very important things regarding issues with measuring post-traumatic growth. So as you know, we have issues in our measures, and now we are going to discuss why are these issues taking place and how we can actually avoid these things. And for that, I will ask you, all of you, to make a little exercise. Today, we will try to measure honesty. So we are the researchers now. We have to be creative. So obviously, you know that psychological measurement, we can broadly put it into these categories: behavioral methods, self-report methods, and physiological measures. So think about it. How will you go if you would like to assess honesty? What will be your take on this matter? Honesty. Well, obviously, the first step in order to try to measure something is to have really clearly the concept that we want to assess. This is why in each research you must conceptualize your construct within your context. It is very important to tell everybody that is reading your paper, what are you considering honesty? So in this case, for our exercise, we will use Peterson and Seligman, and honesty involves being truthful and genuine in one's actions, words, and intentions. How can we assess this? Any ideas? Assessing honesty? Do we have, let me go to the other screen. Let me see if I have hands. Do I have hands? Okay, Moritz.
Well, my first idea would be to measure the willingness to lie, sort of a way around it. So if we could construct different scenarios in which people would rate how likely or how willing they would be to make a small lie or larger lie, that could be one circuitous route, I guess, to measure it, but something that one could answer in a survey.
Yeah, definitely, Moritz. I think it's a good one. Actually, it will be within the behavioral measures. And for example, one of the experiments that we already have in the honesty literature is that they are giving people a dice, and they are supposed to guess what is the amount that they will get in the dice, and they will roll it in private. And they need to say if they were accurate or not. And if they were accurate, they will get some money. And if they were wrong, they don't get anything. So they believe no one is checking if they are honest or not. And so you get people like there, you catch people lying, and then you can compare it, because in these experiments, it's really simple the way they do it, because they do it statistically. So we have a statistically way to test the mean, the average of this kind of experiment. So if in our experiment we are seeing like way more people being accurate, then we know we have dishonesty right there. Exactly. So this will be a behavioral method, a really, really, really good one. Another take, Sasha?
Yes, thank you. This reminded me of studies done with kids when they were tested for agents that are not visible in the room. Will kids cheat if they think somebody is watching them in the room or not? It was Princess Alice, I believe. And then, of course, if they were told, like, on this chair is Princess Alice, and then the investigator would leave the room, and then the kids would cheat or not cheat, depending if Alice is there or not. Yeah. But I also have a problem with the concept of honesty, because it says that there is the absence of lie and mistrust and other things. Because in most cases, probably in some cases, the subject clearly knows what is a lie and what is to be honest, what is to cheat, and what is not to be honest. So these mental phenomena are present while we make decisions to be honest as such. So just a small comment on the...
Yeah, actually, you are discussing, Sasha, a very, very important phenomena, that when we have a psychological constructs, we have different dimensions, right? Different we are assessing this concept, and it has many different layers. That what are we meaning and what are we trying to assess? So in this case, you have to be really specific with the kind of dimension that you want to assess if you have a very complex concept, like in the case of honesty, and you were just describing. So I will advise you, if you want to study a specific psychological construct, the more specific it is and the less complex is, the better you will be able to develop a measure for it. Exactly. Yeah. So do we have any more ideas of assessing honesty? Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, yeah, well, my mind just went initially to religious or ethical motivations for truth telling, and how that might be framed in an interesting way over and against those who are potentially not religiously motivated or housed, if we might put it that way. We could frame that in different ways, but that's initially where I went.
Yeah. So how will you be conducting the testing? So what is the test?
I suppose these tests have been done before, but if you have a sort of subset of the population who is more religiously committed, and you frame sort of truth telling in light of religious conviction or morality in some sense, over and against maybe a population that isn't, I think generally, and you might correct me, but there's not too much of a big difference, at least arguably, between truth telling and lies between those who are religious and those who are not. Although there might be updated studies on that. So, but it is interesting to consider, given some of the backdrop that we're bringing to this course.
Yeah, but at the same time, Andrew, I am thinking that you are raising another very important aspect of psychometrical testing, and it is that you can compare different measures. For example, you can ask people, you can ask them to tell you like how honest they are or how committed they are, and this is self-report, but then you can also just check. For example, if they are religiously committed, how many times do they go to church or other things that they do over there? And then you can just click and know if they are or not. And do you see, you are able to see the correlation between these two things? So you have both self-report and behavioral observations. So it is good to have these kind of combinations, and we will be discussing this today. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it would be also interesting not to measure who is lying more or more prone to lying, being dishonest, but under what conditions this does change. For example, I remember an experiment that was widely cited when they measured the likelihood of people to deceive, deception, and then they had the same people read papers in which it was argued that that we are completely determined and have no free will. And the other group read a paper in which free will was emphasized. And then they did the experiment all over again. And the group who read the paper that there's no free will actually had a stronger tendency to deceive, for deception, after reading that paper.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This will be a manipulation. So in here, the design is an experiment, and you are manipulating the variable. In this case, you are trying to introduce a change. In this case, it was working, right? After hearing all of this of not having free will, then they were more prone to lie. There is another important experiment like that. Actually, is really renowned, even though right now it's under scrutiny because the researcher, she's from Harvard. She's in she's in trouble because she was actually caught being dishonest in her research about honesty. So it's very bad. But anyway, we are just exemplifying how we can assess it. So her team was under the belief that they were able to manipulate how honest can people be with an honesty oath. If at the beginning of reading something, you are asked to be honest and truthful from the beginning and you have to sign it, they were under the assumption that you were more prone to be honest. And they have obviously a control condition because it was an experiment and they were manipulated. So this experiment was actually really famous and they got it published. It's out there, but it wasn't replicable. She's in trouble, but it is a way to manipulate this kind of variables, and it can be done like that. Exactly. Yeah, okay. I think we get a sense of how psychometric works. And now we must see, let me share my screen to come back to my presentation. Okay, so here, for example, I was just putting some of the measures that we already
Now
have in research
see the
in
split
honesty.
screen again.
Sorry, go ahead.
We are seeing the split screen.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. I was looking into the full screen. Let me try again. Is it full screen? Yes, okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so here you can see some of the methods that were used already in honesty research. So as you can see here, for example, regarding self-report techniques, we have one of them is it can be an inventory like the virtues and action inventory of strengths. They are assessing 24 strengths. One of them is honesty. And actually, I think you should know about this measure already because it was the one used in the paper you needed to read for this class. So for example, this is an inventory, it's a self-report inventory that you can use to assess honesty. But we can also use a self-assessment form to use honesty, to assess honesty. And what is the difference? The difference between them is that even though both are obtained via self-report, only one of them is about the perception that you have about yourself. So in this case, we are asking you, how much do you believe you? And then you say how much. So it is the perception. And with the inventories, they are supposed to be designed in a way that sometimes you cannot even tell what are they assessing. You are only answering random questions, and then they are in an indirect way measuring you. So in this case, these are self-report inventories, which are different to self-assessment form. So in the paper that you read for this class, they have both. They use the character strength rating form in order to assess the perceived character strengths. In this specific case, the change in the perceived character strengths. So we have in self-report inventories, we have self-assessment, but we can also have third-party reports, right? And this is very important because like Like already told us, like in free will beliefs, a lot of the research, it is about like how much can people report about themselves. Maybe it is better if we have someone that knows this person well reporting about this person and accounting. So in this case, you can also have this kind of reports. So we have different kinds of self-report, which is really good because having different kinds of assessment will allow us to test the measures, right? Because if they are measuring something and they are like, we are measuring honesty and we are using inventory A, B, and C. And let's say, for example, Sarah, she scores over like 20% in A, but 20% in B, and then 50% in C, you will say, well, there is no congruence there. Like what is measuring? But it seems it's not the same construct, right? So this is why we need several measures. And even if we have self-report, it is also good. But obviously, if we combine self-report with behavioral methods and physiological measures, well, even better. So in the examples that I put you here with behavioral methods, as we already discussed, like experiments where the participants have the opportunity to lie for personal gain, or the manipulations like the one Godehard was telling us, or the one with the honesty oath. And you can also have some specific metrics, like, for example, like we can argue that an honest individual, it is less likely to break the law, for example. So maybe we can find some records of the legal infractions, let's say for driving, for example, that this person has, and then we can have a more objective measure, and then we can run correlations and see if what the person is reporting actually correlates, right? So we have different ways of assessing the same construct, and we have to have them because it will allow us to test the measures that we already use. And obviously we have physiological measures. If we are being deceitful, if we are not being honest, you know, like we start sweating, the temperature in our face start increasing, our respiration rate changes. So we can assess all of that with wearables even, or in the lab. We can assess that, and then we can run correlations with other measures and see if we are actually assessing this kind of construct that we believe we are assessing. Okay, so actually the next session will be an expert talk for you, and the one that is next after that, it will be a lab visit to a laboratory in psychology, and you will be able to see firsthand how many of these measures actually work in the lab and how researchers are using these instruments. Okay, so it is very important for you to know that we need to differentiate good measures from bad measures. And for that, we need to compare or to make predictions about how they behave. And we call this process exploring the test validity and reliability. For example, in the paper that you already prepared for this class, they were using the self-assessment form, the character strength rating form, self and others. So in this case, you were reporting how much do you believe that you grow, and then you were reporting how much you believe someone living with you also grow, or if they didn't grow. So, but in this case, if they had assessed this kind of form, like perceived growth in the person, and then asking someone that knew this person and asking you if you had grown, and then we could correlate, right, your beliefs with, for example, your wife's beliefs of you. And in this case, if they are more or less the same, we will have, in this case, we are calling it congruent validity, because these two measures are supposed to be measuring your level of honesty. And if they highly correlate, then we say, then we can account for congruent validity, for example. Another kind of validity that we have is predictive validity. When you have one measure that if you find this measure is supposed to predict another one, then you have predictive validity. In the case of these experiments that we have right now, let's say, for example, if we are assessing the participants' skin conductance or temperature, for example, so with these two measures, we are supposed to detect when someone is engaging in deceitful behavior. So if these measures that we are gathering with these instruments are actually predicting if they are being deceitful or not, then we will have their predictive validity. This is the way that we construct psychological measures. So we have to have several measures, and we have to run several tests in order to detect if the measure is good or not. So we call this process ensuring the validity and reliability. As I told you before, number one step is to clearly define the construct that you want to measure, the dimensions that it has, and then you have to use different measures in order to assess the same construct, and then run the test of validity and reliability to see if you are actually conducting a valid experiment and are using a valid variable. So here I have in the screen all the information regarding all kinds of validities and reliability that we have in psychology. I remember when we had the talk with Like, I remember Amber was asking, what do you mean with validity? And Licky was telling you, well, we have different kinds of validity in psychology. So these are the kinds, Amber. So we have, look, first of all, you have to distinguish between validity and reliability. So the validity is how consistent is the measure. If you are measuring with the same instrument to the same thing, it should give you the same result over and over. So the results should be consistent. It doesn't concern about if it's right or not. So it can be wrong. It's just reliable. It's consistent. You are getting the same measure. Imagine if we have a measure of honesty and we assess, let's say again, Sarah, we assess Sarah today in the morning, and she scored 86 out of 100. And then we assess Sarah in the afternoon, and she scores 22 out of 100. And then we do it once again during the night, and she scored 12 out of 100. So obviously, this measure is not consistent because her honesty haven't changed through the day in this range, right? So this is consistency. And regarding the validity speaks of the how accurately we are assessing the specific psychological construct that we intend to measure. We want to determine if the instrument is valid or not. So is it assessing the thing we are trying to assess or not? And we have different kinds of validity. Mainly, we have construct validity, content validity, criterion-based validity, and incremental validity. So for you to know is that construct validity has all to do with the dimensions of the construct that you are assessing and if these dimensions actually reflect the reality of your data. For example, in the theory of personality, we have the Big Five, right? The theory of Big Five. And they say the most personalities can be fit into 5 big factors. So they run a factor analysis with a lot of people and try to run correlations, and they were actually able to find that statistically they find 5 clusters clearly defining each one of these traits. So in this case, we can say that this instrument has construct validity because they ran a factor analysis, and the factor analysis is giving you the same numbers of dimensions or factors that you have in your construct. So if they match, then we can say they have construct validity. But also we have content validity. So content validity is the degree to which you are covering the full range of the construct that you are trying to assess. It's the same thing that Sasha was telling us before. Like honesty is a tricky, difficult concept with many different dimensions. We have to be careful with the dimensions we are assessing. So if he were to analyze a specific measure to see if it's a valid measure of honesty, he will be able, if he is an expert on the topic, he will be able to say if they are actually assessing the full range or if they are lacking a specific thing. So this is a different thing. This is content validity. And the one that you will hear the most, and we use a lot in psychology, are the criterion-related validity. And here we use, as I already described, we use different instruments in order to compare, and to make predictions and to see if they are valid or not. For example, we have concurrent validity, which is high correlations with similar construct, as I already exemplified. We have discriminant validity, which is finding low correlations with unrelated constructs. Obviously, you want to find this kind of levels if you are assessing if you're assessing completely different constructs, you will like your data to be low correlated, so you can actually tell that you're assessing two different constructs and they are completely different. And predictive validity, which I already exemplified. One specific measure should predict the behavior of the other variable. So this is all about validity. We also have incremental validity. Incremental validity actually is the highest of all, because here you are able to prove that your instrument, it is actually adding value beyond the measures that we have already. So in this case, this is the more difficult one to get in psychology, incremental validity. For you to know is that if you are looking into the psychometric of a specific test, they will more or less tell you about congruent validity, maybe predictive validity, and for sure construct validity. So these are the one that we report most, but the optimal, the state of the art will be to report all of them to see if the measure is really the best one out there, especially incremental validity. So this is all about validity. Now, reliability, we have different measures of reliability. One is called retest reliability. Remember, reliability is about getting the same result. Do you remember? Just getting the same result. So retest reliability is, as I told you already with the example with Sarah. If we are testing Sarah in the morning, and then we are testing Sarah again during the night, so the measure should be similar. This is retest reliability. So more or less the same amount in the score. We have parallel forms reliability. This kind of measure is when you are testing an instrument, and let's say you have 100 items. So if you want to test them, the whole instrument is supposed to measure, let's say, honesty. So if you want to see if they are really reliable, you take 50 items and you apply them, and then you take the other 50 and then you reapply it in another form. So two different forms as if they were different tests. Obviously, the results should be the same. This is the other kind of reliability. And the most important one, and the most reported in psychology, is the internal consistency reliability. This is a concept that you need to understand really well and to know how it is measured. So we are using Cronbach alpha in order to assess the degree of internal consistency in a test. We say how much is consistent, and this test is just within the test. How much, if I have 10 items, how much each one of these 10 items is actually measuring the same thing and not other thing. Because sometimes we, psychologists, we are building a measure, and then for us it's really straightforward that item 10 belongs there, and then we are finding in our statistics that item 10 has nothing to do with the other items when we run the stats with the responses from the participants. So for that we use Cronbach alpha. For you to know, this is the threshold that you need to consider for Cronbach alpha. If someone is telling you that they have a Cronbach alpha of 0.6, you must know that this is not accepted in the community. It's really poor reliability. So we are used to more to 0.8 and up in reliability in order to see if actually each one of the items were highly correlated with the other items in the scale. Okay? So this is internal consistency reliability, very, very important in the test. And if you want to develop a test and you want to be careful with your internal consistency reliability, you have to first conduct an item analysis in order to revise each one of the items and see how they correlate with the whole scale. Then I will advise you to run a pilot study in order to really define and understand how people is answering to these items, what are they getting from the items, and then improve the internal consistency if some of the items is a bit off. Then running a factor analysis in order to confirm that you are actually assessing the construct that you want to assess. This factor analysis part will be part of the construct validity that I told you at the beginning, and I will now show you how these tests look. And you will also want to have multiple items, because if you use multiple items, then usually a single item is not reliable because you don't know exactly in which direction it's going, and you cannot test it because you have only one item. You don't have anything else to compare it. And it can be a lot of misconception from the researchers and then from the participants. And with just one item, you are not able to catch all the things that can be behind the construct you are trying to assess. So try to always avoid single items measures. Okay, as I told you before, this is an example of how in psychology we do construct validity. So this is all about finding if our measure is actually assessing the same dimensions that we believe we have in the construct. So in this case, I was assessing affect, implicit affect, to be specific. So implicit affect theoretically is supposed to be built from positive affect and negative affect. So we have two big dimensions. In this case, I conducted a confirmatory factor analysis, and then I was able to detect that actually my test, the IPANAT, was assessing too big construct, and I actually even have the 6 subdimensions that I was expecting to. So this is the way we believe we are assessing the same construct, because when we run the stats, this data go together in the same way we believe is supposed to go. So this is the confirmation. And this is all about construct validity. So is my construct measured in a valid way or not? So this is the way how we do it regarding construct validity. Another thing that is very, very important for you to consider regarding measurement is the standardization of measures, the scoring of the measures, and the interpretations that we do of the measures. And here we find big ethical implications, because you have to keep in mind the concept of normality. It is taking psychology to determine a specific cut-off scores regarding psychological assessment, and then these specific cut-off scores, they can tell you who is normal and who is abnormal, and sometimes this can vary, right? Like who makes this threshold? Like what does it mean in different cultures? Like, is scoring this amount in this test actually making someone abnormal? So this is why when you are using this standardized test, you have to be careful with the scoring and how do you use the concept of normality or even psychological health. Also, you have to consider the variability across cultures. And it is very, very important for you to analyze if they are using the proper test for the proper population, for the proper sample, because tests require adaptations in order to be valid in different cultures or different linguistic contexts. So it's very, very important. If you are watching someone in a paper using a measure that was validated with population in the US, and they are using it in Finland without any adaptation, then right there, you know like a lot of bias can be introduced into the measure. So you have to be aware of these kind of things. Okay? Okay, so as you can see, obviously, measurement is really, really important in psychology, and you can conduct research on that. You can conduct psychometric research. Actually, we had a case, Aku, from last cohort in the IRP. He was conducting interdisciplinary psychometric research. It was very interesting. And actually, you already saw his presentation on January. But if you don't remember, he was telling us he conducted in-depth analysis of the methodological aspects of free will beliefs research. He was looking into the conceptualization, and he was analyzing how much this concept actually overlap or not. And he was actually looking into the scales that were used in these studies. He was looking into the kind of variables. He was able to determine that locus of control, self-efficacy was used almost the same that the free will beliefs inventory. And he was discussing about the validity of this. So he was actually conducting a content validity right there. And he also was telling us about the importance of looking into intervariable relationship, how these different constructs actually relate to each other, and how much each one of them contribute to the big construct he was trying to assess, that was free will's beliefs. So he did that, and at the end, once he reviewed all of that, he was looking into meta-analysis. He was doing some. He was given us the arguments regarding the construct, because he noticed the construct were fuzzy in most of the studies. And at the end, he was able, like, he already had the state-of-the-art knowledge in this specific topic, and he was able to formulate empirical hypotheses based in this comprehensive review he did. So it was really great looking him doing this. Only this, he can write this in a narrative review, and this is already one paper, a really important paper, because this speaks about the importance of having someone from philosophy helping psychology to actually assess the construct in a way that we are grasping the whole dimension of the actual construct. So this is why it's really helpful for us psychologists to have you in order to build into this kind of measures. And he did that, and he went even beyond that, because after he was able to identify a specific hypothesis, I think Farhud and him were able to collect some data, and he will test now. He will conduct empirical research. I think he's doing that right now, in order to see if the hypothesis he created actually reflects something in empirical sample. So he went beyond the review, and he's also writing something empirical. So I think this is a great way to do it. If one of you doesn't know yet what to do for the course, for the project, for your research, this is a great way. Like, you can conduct this kind of analysis, psychometric review of any construct of your interest, and all of this, the kind of things he did, is highly publishable. These kind of reviews will inform psychology really well. So it's a way to do it, and then it's the first step in order to jump into empirical research. So I left you there the link for the talk if you want to go back and look it again. But I think it's a great example what he did. Okay, so this was everything for today, and I specifically want to leave some free time for discussing the paper that I asked you to read. But before going into the paper, do I have a specific question regarding the topic today? Was it clear? Was it too much information? Is it interesting? What can you tell me?
No, it's of course interesting, and I think it's quite clear, and we get an overview of the ways that you can describe or conceptualize reliability and validity. What's at this point is still an enigma to me is how you do it statistically and mathematically. So I'm not very well versed in all of that. So I understand the different kinds of validity and reliability that you explained, but I have a very faint idea of how I would do it or how the researchers that I read about or read from did it, right?
Yeah.
So that still leaves me at this point not fully equipped to criticize or to understand what they did, when they employed this or that statistical tool.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you conducted correlations between two variables, Moritz?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. In general, will you say that you understand the concept of a correlation?
Yes.
In general, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How much one variable relates to another variable? Another way to put it is if one variable is occurring x a number of times, then the other variable, if it's highly correlated, should occur a similar amount of times because they are co-happening, right? Correlating. So in this case, Moritz, it's actually really, it can be simple, and we actually will going to do that right now. Let me go to the slides, and here that you have the slide with all the kinds of validities. Basically, all these validities, concurrent validity, discriminant validity, predicted validity, and incremental validity, Moritz, are calculated mostly with a correlation. It's just a correlation. So you have two different measures, two results, and then you correlate it and how much they are related. For example, one thing that I already said, in the paper you read, they did a self-assessment form asking them their own perception of their growth, they grow, right? So let's say someone is reporting, yes, I grew, now I'm at 80. Let's say 80 out of 100 in honesty, before I was at 60, let's say. This is a measure that we have from one instrument. And if we, let's say, we go to his house and we ask his wife or her husband, if we ask someone else to tell about the other person, so we are supposed to be assessing the same thing, the level of honesty that he or she has. So in this case, these two results should be highly correlated. And if they are, then we say we have concurrent validity. So it's just a correlation. And how we run a correlation, we have the instrument, we conduct a survey, we collect the data, we put all this data into a specific software, let's say SPSS or R, and we just give them the instruction, give me the correlations of scoring of this measure with this other measure, and then boom, you have the coefficient, which is Pearson R, and then if you have, let's say, 0.5, you say is like more or less correlated, because correlations goes from -1 to 1. A perfect correlation, positive correlation is 1, and a perfect negative correlation is -1. 0 is no correlation whatsoever. So it has nothing to do. So if you get one test and other test 0.1 or 0.12, do you believe it's highly correlated?
At 0.1, no.
No, exactly. So this is the case. This is the case of the paper you all read, because in the paper they were reporting some correlations, trying to prove their hypothesis, but the correlations are 0.12, 0.15. So it's almost null correlation. So this is the kind of information that you have to know. So it is really simple, Moritz. Concurrent validity, discriminant validity, predictive validity, and incremental validity are tested with a correlation. It's a really simple analysis. And I believe Sasha already conducted some correlations, and he can tell you that it's actually really simple. You put in all the data in the software, and then you run the scores of your test, and then you ask them just to run the correlation. If you want to, I can ask Farhud to walk you through, let's say, SPSS, in order to run a correlation, in order for you to see how easy it is. Actually, I will explain correlations a bit more into depth when we talk about inferential statistics, and then I will ask Farhud to show you how it is done in SPSS, and you will see how easy it is. So the important thing is that you understand what is behind it. So in this case, all of these are correlations. And construct validity, remember, I already said, is a factor analysis. A factor analysis or a structural equation modeling, which is another software, or sometimes the same software. If we are using R can do both. Like SPSS cannot do structural equation modeling, but R can do both. So technically, you are building a model, a statistical model, and you tell to the model how all the elements are related. What element is related to which one, and in which way. And then once you build the model, then you input all your data. If you have 100 participants or 1,000 participants, and the system automatically uses all the data in order to see if the answers are actually related in the way you put in the model. So if you are saying variable A is related in this way to variable B, and then you know that variable A is assessing for certain items, and then variable B for other items, you put all your data inside, but the data is telling you that they are not correlated, then you will get an index in your model that is really low. And then you will say, so my model doesn't work. Usually this index, we have it here. I put you an example. This is the kind of indices that we look into. So here we have the comparative peak index, which is the most important one. So it should be above 0.9 in order to be a valid model. If you have less than that, it means that there is a better explanation of how the data relate to each other, and your model is not good enough. So usually we have to assess these numbers in order to see if your model is correct or not. So obviously, I am not expecting you to understand everything, all of this from the models, but I will expect from you to understand if in the paper they are actually giving you information about the validity or not. Are the instrument valid or not? Are they telling you? Are they reliable or not? Are they giving you this information? This is something really simple you can check. And then if they are using different instruments to assess the same thing, like in the case of the paper you read, then the instruments should be correlated. And if they are correlated, we have congruent validity. For example, in the paper you read, one of the instruments was the self-perceived growth. And obviously after the first COVID wave, and they actually use the post-traumatic growth inventory. So both measures are assessing the same thing. So, and you can go and see into the results. How much are they correlated? And they should be correlated if these instruments are valid. So if you go there, and you will be able to see that they are not correlated. Actually, they are correlated pretty low and just in one dimension. And then you see they are not giving you any proof of the validity. So this is the way we assess it. Yeah, go ahead, Maurice.
Because you mentioned the article, I was confused in the graphics or in the explanations, the analysis part, because they refer or they don't say the degree of correlation or one of the metrics that I know, but they use Cohen's d. I mean that's of course my lack of knowledge of these of this terminology, but I don't know what that indicates. So I'm,
yeah, exactly.
They can tell me anything about Cohen's d before I, go check it out.
Yeah. Exactly. This is the kind of information, precisely the kind of information that I would like you to be now knowledgeable about. And we will be discussing about this. Actually, this famous Cohen D that you are just telling us was the one that I told you that we use to assess reliability. Do you remember that I mentioned? The reliability is how much the measure in one time is related to the second time. So they are using these stats in order to show you how much the first measure they conducted was related with the second one. This is the kind of comparison. So this was not a correlation. This is why they are not giving you R. So in the ones that they are giving you the R are for the other variables. So let me see if I can share my screen so I can show you in the paper. But it's really important that you notice, because understanding the graph, it's a really, really important part of the course. So here in this measure is the one that you are referring to. They are giving you the Cohen's d, actually really high, at least for these character strengths. And they are telling you here in this graph the perceived changes on oneself in strengths following the COVID crisis. So here you have the measure, like you are comparing the measure of yourself and you are looking into the reliability of this measure. So this is not a comparison, just it's a comparison of the same measure, not another measure. This is why you don't have an R. This is the same, but with others. This is self. What do you think of yourself? And this is what do you think of others? Let's say someone that was living with you. This is why they are also giving you the Cohen's d. But when they are actually, and they are giving you the same measure for the actual changes, because they use the VIA inventory before COVID and then after COVID, and they are giving you how much they were related to each other. As I told you before, if the construct are supposed to be assessing the same thing, they are supposed to be correlated, they are supposed to be reliable, measuring the same thing 2 times, and this is why they are giving you the Cohen's d. But regarding the correlations, you have it here, Moritz. The correlations are here. All of these are correlations. And here you have the relationship between the character strengths before the COVID crisis and after. So all of these are how much the strengths were correlating with the VIA changes in character strengths, or with compliance, or with engagement. And this is what I was telling you, that the correlations were too low. Remember that I told you? So, and these are the significant ones, the ones with the asterisk. The others are not even statistically significant. So here, when you are comparing, now that I'm comparing this, I do have correlations here, Moritz, in this graph, as you can see. So they are giving you different information in each one of them. This is why you were looking into Cohen's d. So Cohen's d is a measure of reliability. So the same instruments 2 times. Yeah, and this is the information that we would like you to learn in the course. So It is really good for you to notice. And I would like you to notice a little bit more from that paper. So if we don't have any other question regarding the slides, we can go and discuss the paper. Ready to discuss? What do you think? What do you think of the paper? What can you tell me?
This is just sort of a general point of feedback, but I find that for me, it's still very much a learning process just in reading. I find the very broken sentences make it really difficult for me to sort of see to read in the way that I would be accustomed to in terms of looking for the information. And so it's a lot of very interrupted or sort of fragmented sentences. And so I find I have to read several times to kind of come back to see actually what was the point in the sentence or what's the information that I need to take, because there's so many kind of inserts. So I realized, yeah, it's just a learning process, just literally learning to read, learning a different way to be accessing information.
Yeah, definitely, Sarah. And I think you are making a good point in order to start reviewing the paper, because the way that I will ask you to look into the paper, it is actually the way that you can go in order to start like breaking the in specific parts that will make sense for you. Actually, the first thing I will ask you to do, and I will ask you to do this in a specific assignment, I will ask you for the whole course, I will ask you to read 2 papers. So this paper, and then I will give you another paper also in personality growth. And I will ask you to critically analyze this paper and to extract all the information that we are actually reviewing in the course. And for that, I have a guide for you. I will send you the assignment to your emails, and I will send you a guide of how to do it. And in the first part is looking into the abstract, identifying specific things in the abstract, and then going into the research questions, which is the section right above the method section, looking carefully into the research section, and then into the methods. And this is the part that we are right now. You have to identify what are the variables they are assessing. Very important. What kind of variables they are assessing. Then you have to look into each one of the instruments they are using to assess each one of the variables. Then you have to ask you, are they giving me any information about the validity of this instrument or about the reliability of this instrument in order for you to know if you can actually trust this research, right? So here I will ask you, any of you, did you identify which variables are they measuring? What can you tell me about the variables? We already discussed some of them today. So they are assessing character strength with the inventory, the VIA. So this is one. So the variable is character strength, and the measure they are using is the VIA. They are actually assessing perceived character changes. And for that, they are using the other instruments, the CSCRF, the character strength change. And they are also using the PTGE, the post-traumatic growth inventory, in order to assess post-traumatic growth. So this is another variable. They are assessing post-traumatic growth, they are assessing character strength, they are assessing perceived characters, and they also assess compliance with regulations and volunteering, right? So we have these variables and we have these measures. Yeah, Moritz?
And would we need to add the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic?
See, yes, perfectly observed. This is another one, the impact of COVID, and they are assessing it with an index of crisis-related changes. Exactly, Moritz. And each one of these measures should have certain reliability or validity. They should tell you about it. And maybe you didn't notice, but now that you know more about validity and reliability, like I can tell you that they give you the reliability of the via, and they told you it was 0.7 to 0.91 in the second assessment. So it's more or less okay. And they are giving you the reliability of the post-traumatic growth inventory. These two, none others. So this is like something that is missing in the research, because they are mentioning some reliability, not all the instruments. And what is more important is they are not giving you any measure of the validity of any of these instruments. So you have to be careful when you are looking into a paper. They are using the via, they are using the character strength changes. Are they valid or not? So in my case, and it will be good also if you do it when you are looking into a paper, you go and do some research about these specific measures. And for example, here I have a psychometric analysis of the CSRF, the character strength rating form. And here in this paper that was published in 2014, they were able to determine that they found a good convergence with the VIA inventory. So because the CSRF is related to VIA, and they are finding that, in fact, they are correlating in a good way, and they believe that this instrument is actually valid. So they say here the correlation between corresponding strengths and between both of them are 0.41 and 0.77. So these are correlations, Moritz. These are correlations. So 0.41, it's not that high, but it's more or less something. And 0.77, it's good. So here we can tell that actually this form, it is in fact related to the VIA, and it is assessing more or less the same thing that the VIA. So we have some validity there. And they are not giving you this information, but we can search for this information. A little bit more sadly, when I look into the VIA, so the main one, actually, it has some issues regarding construct validity, because they are reporting that they are like some researchers are reporting inconsistency when they are using this measure. And the thing they are suggesting is that the original authors, they believe that they have 6 big dimensions of virtues, and they are actually just finding 5 instead of 6. So the confirmatory factor analysis failed in this case with the other kind of analysis they were running. So the VIA is not that trustable, because regarding the content, it may be a bit off, but at least they found 5 of the 6 factors. So it's not that bad. So you are now assessing the validity of these measures, right? The measures that they use. But and I have here, I did some research also in the post-traumatic growth inventory from Tedeschi. This is really, really used in post-traumatic growth research. And they are finding a bit of a hiccup also with the factor structure. So once again, construct validity is being at risk. So they are finding just 4 of the 5 initial domains that Tedeschi was theorizing. So it has a bit of some things, some issues right there. Actually, this post-traumatic growth inventory is the most widely used in post-traumatic growth research. This is the one that Blackie was addressing, that Jaja Bikrim was addressing. It was built by Tedeschi, and actually in June, we will have Tedeschi in our expert talks. So you will be able to question him, okay? So all of this is about how much of this information they share with you in the paper. as I already tell you, they didn't share anything. They didn't say anything about the validity, just mention the reliability, but just of two instruments. But because they use different ways of assessing the same construct, which is something really good in this research, we are actually able to run some studies after they conduct the study regarding the validity and the reliability of the instruments, because we can run correlations, right? As I was telling Moritz. So in this case, with this kind of a study, we could actually establish congruent validity if we compare the changes in the VIA with the post-traumatic growth inventory, because they are assessing the same, how much you grew. So we can run a correlation and we can see if these constructs are related. If they were correlated, we could say we have congruent validity there. Sadly, the correlations are too small, and only one of the strengths was statistically significant, and it was spirituality. So we are not able to prove the validity, but we could have, because they use these different instruments, which is something that we have to applaud of them. And also, they ask people to report self-perceived change. And if they would have found the world around and get some other people to make a report on them, also self-report perceived changes, then we could correlate this and we could actually prove congruent validity. Sadly, the perceived change acquaintance was not conducted. So they conducted only the perceived change others. Remember, they were assessing someone else living in their apartment, but not themselves. So we cannot correlate this because it's not the same person that they are assessing. So we are not able to do this in this paper. But it's a good thing that they are asking third-party reports. They try to do it right, but sometimes, obviously, it requires a lot of resources to get a different participants to report on another participants. This is why they didn't do it this way. But obviously, we have some issues regarding the methodology due to some economical decisions. And finally, what about predictive validity? They assess character strength before the COVID, right? They knew how much you were prudent or how much humility you have. And then after that, they were assessing compliance or volunteering. We could say that after a crisis, someone that has a lot of love may engage more in volunteering, right? So we could have predictive validity right there because they assess both. Well, sadly, the way that they assessed volunteering and compliance was with one item. So they only asked, how much have you volunteered after the crisis? And that's it. So as already mentioned, one item scale is not reliable. So it cannot be trusted that much. And the correlation they actually report between some character strengths and the behavior, either compliance or volunteering, it's actually really small. So the correlations are not high enough in order to consider. So we are not able to establish predictive validity either. So what do you think about that? It's more behind a paper that we read at a first glance. Huh? This kind of information, you critically reviewing the validity of the research is the kind of things that we would like you to do in the course. So identifying these elements, variables, measures, the reliability in the validity that they are giving you with the coefficients they are giving you is the kind of things that you have to keep in mind in all the papers. And as I told you, I will ask you to do a critical review of 2 papers for the end of the course. So you will be able to send me this on December. And we will be working on these papers the whole course. So we already discussed this paper, And we will discuss it next time, and we will discuss it next time, because when I show you correlations, we will go to the correlations once again, Moritz, and I would like you also to understand better the graphics, to understand better the descriptive statistics. So we will continue going into this paper. This is why I want you to read it and read it again and try to identify this aspect that I'm giving you in order for you to understand better the whole methodology behind the paper. Yeah. So basically, this is all that I have for you. Do you have some comments? Do you want to say something about the paper? Did it convince you when you first read it? I would like your opinion now that you read it for the first time, and then the comparison after the course, once we observe all the elements that were a bit off on the paper. Yeah, Moritz?
My impression at first was that the paper was very transparent about what they found out and didn't find out, and about the limitations. So while my general impression was that it was a stronger or more insightful paper than what you have now insinuated, I also thought that they weren't boasting of things that they didn't find out. So my impression about the low correlations, for example, insofar as I recognized them, wasn't that they claim something they can't prove, but that they say that they didn't really find that much in that regard, or can't say that much about it, and said that they mainly observed that people's assessments of their own character strength change is high. But that's something that we've heard a couple of times,
Yeah, we can
that the
expect
perception
that.
is strong. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the contribution of the paper, this is another thing that I would like you to look into. And they actually are discussing the low correlations in a part of the paper. But one critique that I have is that if you look into the abstract, they are telling you specific character strengths that we're predicting behavior, and we cannot say that. Because if you go to the abstract, I believe I remember that they are telling you we were able to predict compliance and this with the character strength form, and this is not, you cannot support that with the stats. So in this case, they try to do it at the end, like in the conclusions and discussion, but when they are telling you the name of the paper or the abstract, they are going beyond the stats. And this is the kind of information, precisely the kind of information that I would like you to be aware, so you can better assess how much are they telling you or not. However, this research is good in many ways. It has a lot of strengths. One of them is they are using several measures, and this is really good. This is really good, and they are using different times. One thing that I don't like at all is the short amount of time they are taking to assess like growth after COVID. It's just like a couple of months or 3 months. Like you cannot grow in this amount of time. So obviously they were running out of time. Maybe they have to present a paper or something, but this amount of time is not enough for someone. The COVID wasn't even gone. So we were going through the crisis right there. So this is a big methodological issue, but this is a topic for a different session. Right now, I just wanted you to know about the measures, the variables, how we assess these variables, and how valid is the way we assess them. This is why when you do the lab visit and look into the methods they use in the lab, be really critical and be aware of what things are working and not working, and what things we can actually use in order to make an informed judgment on the results of a paper.